And now we see the governor of California asking for a particular budget to go after, Trump and to try to neutralize Trump. I agree with you. I think the Democrats are going to be the ones engaging in lawfare and weaponization of the system. There'll be efforts to impeach again. That's why I think it would have been so good if Biden had done the right thing and pardoned or commuted the January 6 people, including my client who went in there, was a law student, didn't do any damage at all, and he's been prevented from graduating law school or getting his degree. There's so many people like that, people who've been in jail for selective prosecution. If they had been protesting for Black Lives Matter, the exact same thing, they wouldn't have been prosecuted. It's because they were protesting for Trump that they were prosecuted.
All right, guys, the fallout from this pardon just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Alan Dershowitz is here to break it all down. Why? Because I think we've got to understand, what does this mean going forward? Can Hunter be compelled to testify in front of Congress? Can he be brought up on state charges? Who else might be pardoned? And what does this maybe suggest about where things are? A lot to get to. By the way, the FBI DEI staff, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team at the FBI, say that they're all going to resign if Kash Patel becomes FBI director. So let me look into my crystal ball. Bye-bye. They're gone. Because I don't know that that's what it was going to take. I think they would have been fired anyway. So you guys might want to be updating that resume stuff that you should be doing now. Anyway, and Trump says that there will be held to pay if the hostages held by Hamas are not released by January 20th, 2025, his inauguration day. So much to get into. We're going to have a great conversation with Alan Dershowitz. By the way, I want to tell you, for Thanksgiving, we had 11 people here at the house. 11. And you know what that means in the morning? A lot of coffee. And I had a bunch of Wired to Coffee every morning, a big pot. I got asked so many questions. Who made this coffee? Where did you get it? How can I get some? I'm not kidding. Everybody who is big coffee drinkers was asking me where I got this amazing coffee. And I've been telling you all along, Wired to Fish, amazing beans, Arabica beans from Mexico, Guatemala, consistent with my values. Now, I didn't tell everyone because not everyone's always on the same page family-wise, politically, but I knew right in here, I knew that the coffee everybody was drinking, 25% of the profits supported faith-based initiatives and clean water initiatives. And I felt great because I hadn't gone out and gotten a bunch of Starbucks and made everyone feel like they were supporting woke policies. That's why Wired to Fish is such a great coffee company, because you get compliments like I did. Old to young. I mean, we had my mom, my mother-in-law, my brother, his kid, everybody, and the same thing over and over again. We love this coffee. Where did you get it? How can we get? And I went, wired2fishcoffee.com. Use code we care for 15% off. I mean, how awesome is that? So I'm just telling you, get ahead of the upcoming holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, and get yourself some Wired 2 Fish coffee. Go to Wired, the numeral 2, fishcoffee.com. Use code WeCare for 15% off, and you will have a good cup of coffee and feel great about it. All right, guys, some great guests coming your way. Tomorrow, Congressman Jim Jordan. That's a must-see. Megyn Kelly's on Friday. Next week, Seb Gorka. Tom Homan, the border czar, he'll be here. Bill O'Reilly. That's why I'm telling you, hit that notification button, hit that subscribe button, because you're not going to want to miss an episode. 9 a.m. we do the morning meeting, 6 p.m. the show, and my newsletter every week, SeanSpicer.com. It's free. You can obviously sign up to be a VIP member there. But I've got a great piece that I'm working on. I'm going to do something on the pardons today, and then for Friday, a whole breakdown of the White House briefing room and how it can be reformed, with insight only a former press secretary can give you. So just make sure you're watching that. All right. Before we go, I've got a great conversation headed your way with Alan Dershowitz, and I'm going to love this because he knows more about the law and the Constitution than anybody I know, and he's going to give us insight into Hunter Biden's pardon. And then, by the way, after that, we've got a great conversation about a group that's spending $1 million helping President Trump with his nominee. So sit back, relax. It's going to be awesome. By the way, I've struggled with weight my whole life, and I I've tried to figure out, I've done every fad diet. I've done Atkins, keto, Mediterranean, intermittent fasting. And I finally came across the folks at My PhD Weight Loss. And it's phenomenal because it's not a fad diet. It's a lifestyle change. You get a consultant, a nutritionist that you meet with every week for these weekly weigh-ins. And let's face it, the holidays are a tough period. I mean, I've dealt with this before. I just did it at Thanksgiving, but there's accountability and there's plans that they can come up with saying, okay, here are things that you can do to replace this meal. Here's how you can mitigate some of the damage that might be done by eating like 18 pies. Anyway, I'm down a few pounds. I'm still on track. I feel good about it. And they helped me through the first, Thanksgiving. Now I've got to get ready for the next holiday. So this is the folks as you hit the party circuit, the holidays. Don't wait till New Year's. Call the folks at My PhD Weight Loss. They give you some starter food, but they've got weekly check-ins, accountability, and nutrition help that you can't get anywhere else. You'll get this weekly starter food at no extra cost. Give them a call at 1-864-644-1900 or go to myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com. All right, I want to bring in the man himself, the host of the Dershow, who's got a book on every subject. He is a U.S. constitutional law and American criminal attorney, Mr. Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, good to see you. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
I did. Thank you. And you too.
All right. I'm so excited. I've sat around and said to everyone, I love to pontificate on this pardon stuff and everything else going on, but I'm like, I've got Alan Dershowitz coming up. So every question's going to get answered. So let's just start with the basics. On this pardon, does this mean that I know I read it, but just from a legal perspective, does this mean that for that 11-year period, that anything that he did that was a federal crime, he can't be touched?
That's right. And it might in the end backfire because it means he can be asked about them and he doesn't have a privilege against self-incrimination. If the president had just commuted his sentences on the tax and gun charges, he still have his full Fifth Amendment rights. Now he's going to become the star witness for the Trump administration. He's going to be called by the House Judiciary Committee, Senate committees. He's going to be asked to testify against his uncle, against his father. And remember, it doesn't immunize him against future perjury. If he were to lie deliberately in front of any of these committees or in front of a grand jury, he could be prosecuted. And by that time, it would be too late to have it commuted by his father. So I think the president may have gone a little bit too far, probably would have done him a better favor if he had just commuted the 2 sentences that he could have gotten for the 2 charges that he pleaded guilty and was found guilty on.
So let me ask you this. When Tom Cotton and others on Capitol Hill say that he could be called to testify in Congress, what you're telling me is there's no excuse that he can give now not to show up.
That's right. I mean, he'll try. He has a very, very good lawyer, Abby Lowell, and probably will try to come up with some argument. Well, maybe he's still vulnerable to state charges. After all, if you violate your federal income tax, you might violate your state income tax as well. Or maybe he was violating a state gun law as well. But it wouldn't cover him for Burisma. It wouldn't cover him for Ukraine. It wouldn't cover him for any of the international.
Wait, hold on. So explain to me what you're saying. So I'm the chairman, I'm Jim Comer, I'm the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. I want him to testify now on whatever. And so he could then say, but I would incriminate myself on state issues, so I still have a Fifth Amendment right. Is that, I mean, he could use that as an excuse?
He could. And that might apply to the tax and gun charges. It probably would not apply to any of the charges relating to Ukraine or when Biden was vice president. Now, those also may be banned by the statute of limitations, by state statute of limitations. Federal statutes of limitations are much broader because they have what's called the RICO law or conspiracy laws, which go back way, way back in time. So I don't think he realistically has a Fifth Amendment claim at all. I suspect he's going to have to testify, and I don't know whether he has anything that's incriminating against his uncle or against his father, but he's going to have to tell the truth because he's not immune from prosecution for perjury.
So let's just stick with this for 1 second. If you're the House Oversight Committee, you want to be probably fairly specific in what you call him to testify for, thereby limiting his lawyer, Abby Lowell's ability to respond. So if you said, I just want to talk to you about, say, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, right? Which is FARA, the idea that and so therefore there's no state component to that. They would be on pretty solid ground then.
They would be absolutely on solid ground, and he would be held in contempt if he refused to answer questions of that kind. And so I think a good lawyer in front of an investigating committee can structure questions to which he will have no Fifth Amendment right.
Okay, so then let's go to what you said about I mean, I'll walk it back for a second. What troubles me about this thing is that he was brought up on two charges, a gun charge and a tax charge. And yet Biden made this sweeping pardon, and the pardon attorney at the Department of Justice for decades said that they hadn't seen something this sweeping in decades. And the idea is, well, why? What's it behind it? And I've got to think, and maybe this is just the skeptic in me, that Biden was basically he knew that there was more. They knew that there was more. Burmisma, FARA, the big guy, all of that kind of stuff, and said, if I make him immune from everything, that helps him.
Well, I think that was an emotional response. This was over Thanksgiving. He was surrounded by family members who were giving him only one side of the story. And I think he wanted to do what he thought was best for Hunter Biden. He may have blundered. It may backfire. By going back this far, he takes away his Fifth Amendment claims that would have allowed him to refuse to testify. Now he may have to testify about these matters. And so it's not clear that his father did him any favors by the breadth of the pardon. Also, by making it a pardon instead of a commutation. A commutation would have precluded him from going to prison at all, but would have kept a conviction on his record. That may have protected him more from the consequences of a very aggressive prosecuting. Now, let me add one thing. Trump expressed sympathy personally for Biden, for Hunter Biden, after the election. And Trump may call off the dogs and say, look, enough's enough. Let's end this lawfare. Look, I really, really wish that what Biden had done was saying, look, there have been selective prosecutions here. My son's one of them. He's not the only one. The January 6th people were selectively prosecuted, the ones who didn't commit any violence, because the Black Lives Matter people weren't prosecuted. So I'm hereby going to pardon or commute all the sentences of all the nonviolent January 6th people and my son on the same principle. That would have been brilliant. It's still not too late to do that.
Wait. So look, you are still a Democrat. You really think that would have? I get your point. Believe me, I think that he could have thrown Trump in there and said, I also think Trump was selectively prosecuted, and so I'm pardoning him for all crimes too. Right? It would have been sort of Ford to Nixon, allow the country to heal and move on. But I just think the left would have lost its mind.
I think they would have, but I'm no longer a Democrat. And
that's good point. My apologies.
The left, I've always been a civil libertarian. I've been a libertarian. I've been a centrist, and I have been a Democrat until the Democrats left me. When Democrats abandoned free speech principles, went toward woke considerations, I became an independent. But you think you're right. I think the crazies on the left would have really gone after him. But I think history would have remembered him much more positively.
All right. I want to, I guess it's what you guys call moot court. I apologize again because I have no legal training except for that which you provide me on these interviews. So let me just play this out because there's something that caught my eye and you just brought it up. They claim that this happened all over Thanksgiving. They were having a Thanksgiving meal and the subject of Hunter. I mean, I'm sure that's what every family discusses. Hey, Hunter, how's the prosecution going? Are you ready to go to jail? Dad, what about a pardon? But let me just ask this from a legal standpoint. So this comes up at dinner and Biden says, you know what, Hunter, I'm not going to let this happen as a dad. I want to pardon you. Walk me through just from he picks up the phone, maybe even Thursday night, and he calls his White House counsel and says, counsel, I've decided after dinner, we finished dessert, and we're going to pardon Hunter. He announced this on Sunday. From a legal standpoint, is that a reasonable timeline? Meaning Thursday night, best scenario, after dinner, he calls his counsel and says, hey, sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to issue a pardon for Hunter. I want it ready to go before I leave for my trip. Can they get that done that quick?
I think they could. The pardon is quite extensive and quite detailed. It may have been in the works before, possibly. Look, if I'm counsel to President Biden and I anticipate all the eventualities, I'm already thinking about the possibility of a pardon, even though the president said he wouldn't do it. I've known Joe Biden since 1980. I met him through Ted Kennedy when I worked on Ted Kennedy's campaign. He's a very decent man personally, and he cares deeply about his family, and he's very emotional. And so, if I'm White House counsel, I'm thinking that he may change his mind over Thanksgiving, and I'm ready to do what my president wants me to do. So, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that between Thursday and Monday morning, he could get the papers all ready. By the way, you don't need papers. All the president has to do is say, I'm pardoning, and that's done under the Constitution. And so the pardon was effectuated the minute.
Right, but the idea that it was this extensive, that just suggests to me as a layman that there was some thought about how to actually go about it, as opposed to a normal pardon, which would say, hey, these are the two crimes you've been charged with. You're pardoned from both of those. There was someone who said, let's have a discussion about the extent and the breadth of this pardon. It wasn't like Joe just came up with this on his own.
No, I'm sure that Abbe Lowell had input into this. Abbe Lowell and his client have become close over the years, and I'm sure Abbe Lowell wanted the broadest possible pardon for his client. And I think they used the Nixon pardon as a kind of template for what happened. And with Nixon also, he wasn't even indicted or even under investigation, except by congressional committees. And President Ford said, for the good of the country, I'm going to give him the broadest blanket possible pardon. And he did. Now, of course, they then didn't really call him and make him the star witness because Ford had said, I want to put this behind us. And of course, that's a Republican president pardoning a Republican. Here you have a Republican pardoning a Democrat with Republican-controlled House, Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled Justice Department. We may see some actions taken. By the way, there could be civil actions. They could take a page from the book of Letitia James, a terrible page. It's horrible precedent. But she went after Donald Trump and made up a civil claim against him and got a $500 million judgment against him. That is not immunized by a pardon. They can still go after him civilly.
What like under, I mean, and I get it. Letitia James clearly went out on a, not even a limb, like a small, tiny branch. What would, if someone said to you, okay, I want to do the same to Hunter, what would be like something that they could do? Would it be like a state tax issue, maybe that he didn't pay his taxes there, or that the state was violating the gun charge? I mean, what could there be? Because he was in Delaware. Delaware's still controlled by Democrats.
Yeah, look, if somebody asked me to do that and resign, I wouldn't ever participate in a get Trump or get Biden approach. I hate this idea of weaponizing lawfare against anybody. But if I were an immoral or amoral prosecutor, I'd say, yeah, there was civil fraud here. There was a failure to disclose this and that. And using the precedent of Letitia James, you could go after Hunter Biden for every nickel he has and probably go after members of his family who were enriched by his allegedly fraudulent conduct. I don't think they're going to do that. I think Trump's a better man than that. And I think that his statement showing sympathy, family sympathy for a former addict may govern here. And this may be, in the end, something that benefits Hunter Biden, but legally it could backfire.
Yeah, I don't think Trump may have the best thoughts about trying to move forward. But the problem isn't even Biden. It's the Jamie Raskins and the Adam Schiffs of the world who will go after him again and impeach him and try to do stuff. And the Letitia James. I mean, I think Biden retires to Delaware and is never seen from again.
Yeah.
But I actually, that's the problem, is it's not them. It's that Trump has to worry about the Schiffs and the Hakeem Jeffries and the Jamie Raskins of the world, who will continue to go after him because they find it politically advantageous.
Now you're getting personal. You're going after all my former students. Jamie, our student in my class in criminal law, as of course was Ted Cruz. So, I taught
There you
people
go.
the political spectrum. And but Jamie also, Jamie Raskin, he lost his son. He has had his problems. He's a very sympathetic, decent guy too. I don't think we're going to see piling on here. I hope we're going.
No, not to Biden, but my point is that I think that Trump could show sympathy to Biden and say, you know what, I won. Let's put the past in the past. Biden goes out to pasture. Hunter goes and does whatever he does, sells paintings on the street corner. But my point is that the Democrats writ large won't give up. They'll still keep coming after Trump. Like they're not going to go, hey, Trump was the better guy in this, so let's just leave him alone. They're going to come after him.
I completely agree. They haven't let off in New York at all. New York should pardon Trump or should drop all the prosecutions against him. Now we see the governor of California asking for a particular budget to go after, Trump and to try to neutralize Trump. I agree with you. I think the Democrats are going to be the ones engaging in lawfare and weaponization of the system. And there'll be efforts to impeach again. You can be sure of that. And that's why I think it would have been so good if Biden had done the right thing and pardoned or commuted the January 6 people, including my client who went in there, was a law student, didn't do any damage at all, and he's been prevented from graduating law school or getting his degree. There's so many people like that, people who've been in jail for selective prosecution. If they had been protesting for Black Lives Matter, the exact same thing, they wouldn't have been prosecuted. It's because they were protesting for Trump that they were prosecuted.
To the extent possible, give us some context on that. Like when I hear when Trump tweets or puts a Truth Social out saying something about the January 6th prosecutions, people always go, I can't believe he's going there, generally. But I think for a lot of people, they don't have the perspective that people like me and you and a lot of our viewers do, that a lot of these people were simply protesting. So as a percentage, I mean, just break it down to the extent you can. I don't need you to be specific unless you can. But like, is it 10% that hit a cop or did something bad? Is it 5? Is it 50? Is it 70? But what percentage of the folks are being prosecuted and or held in jail, committed just basic were protesting and expressing themselves?
The vast majority. My client's a perfect example. Law school student. He thought the election was unfair, came to Washington, didn't even intend to go to the Capitol, listened to Trump's speech, went down to the Capitol, was waved into the Capitol. We have videotape showing he's being waved in by the police, goes there, makes his point, goes, leaves, then gets indicted for a felony. The vast majority of people were doing less than what Black Lives Matter rioters did on the West Coast and in parts of the country. And believe me, if this had been a Democratic protest, and we've had many of these protests in Washington, D.C. I participated in some of them when I was young. I protested. I remember when the king of Saudi Arabia, who was at the time a slave owner, came, I tore a flag down from the Lincoln Monument because I was a 15-year-old, so emotional. People do that all the time, and there was an enormous overreaction to January 6th and an underreaction to Black Lives Matter. That's called selective prosecution.
There's also a group of people that I put myself in, and not that I was there, but I'm saying that when I'm so curious about events in DC in particular, or political events as well. And so sometimes I'll see a large group gathered and I'll be like, hey, what are they protesting? What do they care about? And I just am more curious than I am supportive or, against it. So I'll walk down. What are you there for? Whatever. And I wonder how many of the people who were there weren't even there. I know sometimes we talk about people participating or protesting or pointing out the prayer review, but there's also people who I think are actually just curious who got wrapped up in this as well.
No, I'm sure that's right. It's a continuum. And at the one extreme of the continuum are the violent people who should be prosecuted. At the other extreme are the people you've described. We've all seen that. I was at the Martin Luther King talk in 1963. I was a law clerk. I went with my judge and I listened. I didn't agree with everything that was said at that event. I agreed, obviously, with Martin Luther King's dream speech. But, part of the right of protest is the right to observe protests.
Well, that's the first time I ever put eyes on Alan Dershowitz. I grew up in Rhode Island, and my dad's office was in Newport, and he would bring me to work. And what did I do? Well, I heard about this Klaus von Bülow case, and so I would see it on the news every day. I was curious. I would wait in line and walk in and just watch, because I thought to myself, it's on TV every day. I want to see it for my own eyes. I mean, there's also a curiosity. But on this, and I want to get back to the pardon in a second, but one last thing that I have been intrigued by, again, as a layperson, I've watched these tapes over and over again about a guy named Ray Epps, and I go, I don't get it. How does a guy like that, who talks openly about storming the Capitol, going in, not get prosecuted for anything?
Prosecutorial discretion is a central part of the American system. They don't have it in Germany. In Germany, there's no discretion. If you're guilty, you're prosecuted, and there's no plea bargaining of the kind that we have in the United States. But here, everything's up to the prosecutor, and they pick and choose. And I've seen horrible instances of selective prosecution, of people being far more guilty not being prosecuted, and far less guilty being prosecuted. And then you have disparities in sentencing. If President Biden had addressed that and talked about that as a general principle, and then said, I'm going to look at every single case of selective prosecution, and by the time I leave office, I will have hopefully addressed that problem, that would have been a terrific thing to do. It could have put an end to lawfare, could have put an end to the weaponization. But instead, by having it a one-off just for his son, he created a human issue, but an issue that won't stand him well in the courtroom of history.
All right, so let's go back to this pardon and others. I maintain, and at least it's just my theory, that part of the reason that this was so sweeping is because there's a lot of other stuff out there that they know. And I think that when you see a lot of the connections that Joe Biden's brother Jim is connected with Hunter on, I've got to believe that Jim Biden and potentially some other Bidens, potentially Biden himself, will issue pardons to all of them on January 20th or right before, because I just can't see this being limited to Hunter. They've got to believe that there is some concern for their future out there in terms of prosecution. And I've got to believe that Biden will potentially pardon all of them and himself. Do you think that that's a valid theory?
I think it's a valid theory. I don't think he's going to pardon himself. I think that would doom his legacy. Whether he pardons his brother or not, I don't know. Remember, the statute of limitations has expired on the worst of these allegations going back to Burisma. Now, federal law does have RICO and conspiracy statutes that expand the statute of limitations in a kind of like accordion-like way. But I just don't think that Biden is going to let himself be so attacked by history. I think he's going to stop with the Hunter Biden thing. And remember, he also talked about Hunter Biden being a recovering addict and all. Right. None of that's true about any of the other people.
So I can appreciate any father or parent defending their kid. I mean, I would go to the mat for my kids.
Sure.
But when he issued this statement, it was almost like a role reversal. He's been adamant that we cannot attack the judiciary system. We have to respect the will of a jury. Quote, no one is above the law. Direct quote, Joe Biden. The statement seemed to attack the Department of Justice as a selective prosecution, as you've mentioned, for others. How does that, as a lawyer, as somebody who has stood up for the Constitution and the rule of law, trouble you the way that he pivoted and now attacked the Department of Justice for this, quote, selective prosecution that he says nobody else would have faced if their name wasn't Hunter Biden?
No, I think it's the best thing he did. I'm glad that he criticized the Justice Department. I'm glad that he vindicated what I've been saying for years now. Book Get Trump, that the Justice Department is being used selectively. Now a Democrat says it. Republicans have been saying it. Now we can accept it as the truth, and we can see real reform in the Justice Department. I don't think it's an accident either that we see this pardon coming shortly after the president designates his team, FBI head, head of the Justice Department, deputy head of the Justice Department, Solicitor General. All these people now have a weapon. And the weapon is that, the president of the United States, the Democrat, has said the Justice Department engages in selective prosecution. That's why Smith was so angry at this. And I suspect that Merrick Garland is furious at this. So they're unhappy. I'm happy as somebody who's been a critic of this for a time to be vindicated by both parties.
So you mentioned the team. What do you think of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel for FBI? Pam Bondi, obviously the Attorney General nominee.
She's fantastic. I worked very closely with her on the first impeachment. She's brilliant. She's hardworking. She's the nicest person. I can't imagine somebody better for Attorney General. I don't know the other people who were within the Justice Department. I don't know Patel, but I do know Pam Bondi. I do know the State Department people. I'm very happy about who he's appointed in regard to Israel, Mike Huckabee. I'm happy with the State Department choice. I'm happy with so many of his choices, and of course that's part of our Constitution. The Senate has the right to review every one of these choices and decide whether to confirm them.
All right, I want to get back to Israel, but before I do that, you brought up the process. There is talk in Washington. I don't think it's going to get used, but if it does, your understanding of the Constitution, does the president have the right to recess appoint these individuals?
The Supreme Court has spoken on the issue in a somewhat ambiguous way. The intent of the recess provisions were at a time when you had to go to Congress by horse. And
Right.
if, traveling from Pennsylvania to Washington, that's not such a bad trip, but you're going from Maine to Washington, recess appointments could be a long, long time. It was not intended to give the president a way of circumventing the constitutional requirement of consent by the Senate. And I don't think that President Trump is going to use it in that way. Presidents have used recess appointments for political reasons. Thurgood Marshall was a recess appointment because Southern Democrats wouldn't approve a black man for a circuit court appointment. And he served as an interim appointee for a long, long period of time. So it's been used by both parties.
Okay. The last thing is you brought up Israel, and obviously Mike Huckabee appointed to go be ambassador there, which I think is a great choice, as you mentioned. But Trump put out a truth yesterday that says that there will be hell to pay if the hostages, U.S. citizen, and I think most specifically the hostages overall that are being held by Hamas are not released by Inauguration Day. Do you think that was a smart tactic?
Absolutely. I think replicating Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan said it quietly when he came to office, and sure enough, all the American hostages that were being held by Iranian mullahs and young people who then became the leaders of Iran were freed on that day. And I think he's sending a message that don't mess with me. There are Americans there, and we're going to do everything in our power to stop you from keeping them. So I hope Hamas gets the message. I hope these poor folks are released. I will continue to wear my little hostage pin until the day every single hostage is released. And I've met the parents of the hostages. I met people whose kids were killed on October 7th, including one kid who was beheaded. And they sold his head. They sold his head. Hamas asked $10,000 for his head. Finally, the Mossad retrieved the head so that this poor father could bury his son with his body intact. These are brutal, brutal people, and they have to be responded to with force. And I'm glad that President Trump has sent a powerful message to Hamas, to Hezbollah, and to Iran. It's already worked with Iran. Iran did not attack Israel once Trump was elected. They got the message. And I think it's really, really important that that message be emphasized, and I'm glad the president-elect did that.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate your input on this. I mean, the nice thing is all of these subjects are covered in books that you've written already. So, I mean, you've got it all covered, Professor. I appreciate you joining us again. And if we don't talk again, hopefully we do. But if we don't, I wish you and your family a very safe and joyous holiday season.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I always enjoy being on with you.
Thank you. All right, really appreciate that interview with Alan Dershowitz. Amazing insight into what's actually happening and the options that exist for the Trump team, for the next DOJ, for Congress. Don't think you're going to hear that too many other places. So hope you enjoyed that. But I've got a really interesting conversation coming up with Ryan Walker of Heritage for Action. These guys are doing some really big, bold things, helping President Trump kick off the administration and get his appointees over the line. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Before I do, though, real quick, look, the Democrats are still in charge for a while. We've been talking about what they're going to do. They hired all these IRS agents. You guys know what I'm talking about. They're looking for ways to spend more money in the government, and these 50,000 IRS agents are not sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They are out there filing what they call pay-up notices. What does that mean? It means that if you have personal or business taxes that you've maybe missed a deadline on, owe some money, they're going to come after you. You'll get what's called a pay-up notice. Maybe they knock on your door. Maybe you get it in the mail. Maybe they call you. Trust me, we've talked about this before. You never want to go up against the government on your own. And the folks at Tax Network USA are the folks that I think are the best in the business when it comes to dealing with the IRS. These guys know what agents can be dealt with, which ones to stay away from. They've got decades of experience, and they've recovered over $1 billion for your clients. So if you get one of these notices and you have to deal with the IRS, do not try to go it alone. I think the folks who are best at dealing with the IRS are the folks at Tax Network USA. You can go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, full name there, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, for an absolutely free consultation. They will walk you through some simple questions to talk about where they think they can save you money and get you the best deal before the IRS tries to take more aggressive steps. So visit tnusa.com/Sean Spicer or call 1-800-958-1000. All right. I want to introduce to you guys Ryan Walker. He's the Executive Vice President of Heritage Action for America. They are doing some innovative stuff, both to keep Congress from spending money, key, and also to help President Trump. Ryan, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
All right. So you guys have launched this $1 million effort to support President Trump's cabinet picks. Walk me through what that entails.
Yeah, so we're going to be in states that are of key importance in the confirmation fight that will inevitably happen in the Senate. We're going to be activating our grassroots activists on the ground in those states, sending them to offices, having them call and email their lawmakers, their senators, and urging them to unite behind the president's cabinet nominees and vote to confirm them as quickly as possible so that this administration can get going. The first 4 years were not like that. It was delay after delay after delay, and we saw the impacts of that. So Heritage Action and Heritage Foundation are committed to helping these nominees get across the finish line, and we're going to commit $1 million to be able to do that.
And so what does that look like? Is it like, okay, we know that the nominee for Health and Human Services, Bobby Kennedy, we want to get 2 Democrats to support him. So let's go in and look at where we can find Democratic support. Is it just keeping the 53 Republicans together? Like, is it individualized so that, you know, the plan for HHS is different than the plan for DOD? Or is it just is it a broader effort?
It's a broader effort. We're focused on the 53 Republicans that will make up the Senate majority next Congress. And so we're trying to convince them all to unite behind these nominees. We should have no defections. We should have no Republicans on our side of the aisle that are voting no on these nominees. And we need for the people in those states to be aware of their senators' expectations and what we would like to see out of them.
Okay, so there's no like, let's say when Tulsi Gabbard was announced as Director of National Intelligence, Bernie Sanders actually said some positive stuff about her. So is there any attempt to maybe go after some Democrats that you think are gettable on specific nominees?
There are. And there are folks like Senator Rubio who will have expected to have wide support, even amongst his Democrat colleagues. But we will take those issues up as they come. Obviously, there are a number of weeks before those votes to confirm these nominees come up in the Senate. We have to get these folks sworn in to the 119th Congress. So as some of these senators start to become more public about their stance on these nominees, if it's any one in particular, we will focus on that and target those senators. Obviously, we would love to have Democrat support. So if we see inklings of that, like you mentioned with Senator Sanders, we will certainly commit resources to doing that as well.
All right, you mentioned the grassroots aspect of this, which obviously I think is great, getting those people fired up, motivated. What are the other tactics that you're using?
Yeah, so we'll do patch-through calls. We'll have a nationwide...
Explain what patch-through calls is.
Yeah, so we're calling individuals who are compelled and highly likely to support these nominees from the start. And we're asking them to connect to their Senate office so that they can express their support for these nominees and urge their senators' support on the floor. And so we're directing those calls. We'll reach out to individuals that we know are interested in this topic and connect them directly with their Senate offices. We'll have a national text message campaign, so we'll be educating voters on these nominees and who they are and their backgrounds and which senators should be supporting them. And then we'll do targeted digital ads in those states of concern. And I think we'll have a national media campaign and a television ad campaign that will accompany all of that work as well.
Okay. Are there any Republicans I've got to imagine, I'm just thinking through the list right now, but a Ted Cruz, for example, I think he's going to be pretty solid on every Republican nominee. On the flip side, I think a McConnell from Kentucky might be somebody that you have to worry about in a lot of these. So how adaptable is it to make sure that you're focusing on a McConnell, for example, that you may lose?
Yeah, well, that's our key effort. That's the thrust of our effort, is to go after these members like a Mitch McConnell, like a Susan Collins or a Lisa Murkowski out in Alaska, who have taken independent votes, what I would say are independent votes in the past. And so we're going after these folks that we're anticipating could be on the edge of support or not support.
And is there any consideration, like Lisa Murkowski is one thing. I mean, that's a personal thing versus an ideological thing, right? I think she could vote pretty solid Republican and get reelected in Alaska. So I get that. Susan Collins, though, I think is a different breed. I mean, I personally believe that if you don't have Susan Collins running for reelection, it's going to be extremely difficult to hold that seat. So the question is, do you have to be careful how hard you push on someone like Susan Collins?
Of course. And again, our message is not antagonistic to these senators necessarily. It's a message of uniting behind the cabinet nominees that this president has put forward. We saw this campaign, this election cycle. Many people rode the coattails of Donald Trump into their office and the seats that they have. Those coattails are very long. Those policy positions that he's advocated for on the campaign trail are endless. And it is miraculous how quickly these members took up the policy solutions that Donald Trump was putting forward. So I think they need to be aware of that dynamic. They need to, calculate that into their thinking, and we're going to make sure that they do.
Okay. I want to pivot for a second. You've got a great op-ed out in the Washington Times entitled "Putting Americans' Priorities Ahead of Liberal Agendas." And I think the thing that I found fascinating was there are two aspects of it. One is what's happening right now. There's this massive desire in Washington, almost a reflex at this point, to pass this massive omnibus bill where everyone throws the kitchen sink in it. What are you trying to do from a Heritage Action for America standpoint to prevent this massive spending bill get pushed through at the end?
Yeah, listen, this is the time of the year that these kinds of things sail through, especially in an election year during the lame duck, when there are a lot of members who have retired or lost their elections and they have no connection back to their people and their constituents. And so I think that historically we've seen these massive spending bills, to your point. Members don't even know what's in them. And that's honest. That is true. The members have almost no idea what's in them. They may know one or two talking points, but overall they know nothing. And so instead of having to negotiate with Democrats in a lame duck session of Congress, our advocacy is that Republicans put forward a 3-month CR to get into 2025, into March of next year, to allow a trifecta government controlled by Republicans to have their imprint on the omnibus. And on the margin, that is a much better product than anything that would pass in December, 5 days before Christmas, with Democrats at the negotiating table. So on net, in March, we're in a better position than we are now.
How serious do you see the issue of spending and debt reduction becoming in this next Congress?
I think it'll be substantial. Reconciliation is a package. It's a process, really, that the House and Senate use to quickly pass legislation, mainly budget related. And Republicans have taken up this idea of reconciliation and are putting together a package that they'll bring to the floor in the first 6 to 8 months of the Congress. We're $36 trillion in debt. We've got to do something about it. And members need to wake up and realize that. But as long as we're going through this broken appropriations process where we're doing omnibus spending bills once a year, I think that we're going to continue to see the results that we've seen over the last, 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, $36 trillion in spending. Unreal. And if we don't get our act together soon, that interest on that debt payment starts to really crowd out the basic necessities of actually government. Ryan Walker, thank you and everything that you guys at Heritage Action for America are doing over there to keep us in check spending and to support President Trump. Greatly appreciated. Guys, we have a great week and further ahead coming your way. Megyn Kelly's going to be here. Tom Homan's coming up. He's our new border czar. Congressman Jim Jordan, Bill O'Reilly, Seb Gorka. Make sure you're hitting that notification button. You're never going to want to miss that because that ensures you get the show every day. A lot of great guests over the next couple of weeks. We're going to continue that well through the new year. Make sure you're signing up for my newsletter every week, SeanSpicer.com. It's free. You get to hear great insights there that we don't always get to on the show. Appreciate you being with us. Check back in tomorrow. Megyn Kelly on Friday, by the way. So have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.